Hi folks, Nella here. So this video is actually going to be the first in a series of, I believe, 3 videos talking about Cassie and some of the new information I have about her. And credit for a good number of these ideas has to go to Gothic Shadow, who's linked in the description. We chatted back and forth about ideas for the world, and Gothic Shadow really helped me get a clearer understanding of how Cassie's world works and the technology and the look of it. So big shout out to Gothic Shadow. Anyway, on to the information. So I'm going to start off with the technology. This video is actually going to be about the tech and the environment of the world that Cassie lives on, which is not Earth, by the way. She lives on a different planet than Earth. I don't know if Earth per se exists in her world. I'm not sure. I really have no clue. Maybe, who knows? Anyway, on to the world. So the environment of the world is very different than our own. It's more, how can I put this? It's more uniform. And one of the things is that it has a very dense atmosphere. This atmosphere actually prevents signals to be broadcast for long distances. For instance, they do still have radio, which they call the wireless, but the broadcasting range is very short compared to what it is on our own world. And just by pure necessity, their tech has developed to get around the fact that they cannot broadcast things across long distances. One of the other things about the atmosphere is that it has these low-hanging clouds. They're kind of a orangish-reddish color, and it's partially pollution, and it's partially just how the atmosphere has always been. But if you were to ask any of the inhabitants if their air is polluted, they would say, of course not. Because this bit of pollution that they have has been there for as long as anyone can remember. There's also a lot of dust and grit that's in the air. So in addition to having these low-hanging clouds, there's also dust storms that happen. They don't typically cause that much damage, but it's enough that the outsides of buildings look quite worn down due to being blasted constantly by dirt. There are pockets of nature that is quite different from the surrounding areas, but they're protected by a dome, which isn't to say that there's only one, but each one is covered by a separate dome, and these domes are called the biodomes. It's essentially like they've taken a nature preserve and enclosed it in a bubble. If you need a good image of what these domes look like, is think about mid-century World's Fair and Disney's Epcot. Essentially these not plastic, but glass and metal domes that you can clearly see into, minus the dust and dirt, that you can see into, but you can only enter with special permission, and pretty much only scientists and researchers are allowed to enter into the domes. And no one is allowed to spend any sort of prolonged time inside of the domes, just to protect the integrity of the nature preserves. The cities, for the most part, are not domed. The only exceptions being a handful of research cities in more secluded areas. The problem is when you get to the more secluded, the more kind of more the offskirts of the planet, the dust storms get stronger, so they have domes to protect them partially from these more severe weather patterns. But those cities are, like I may have said, mostly populated by researchers and scientists who are studying the weather, studying the nature preserves, or developing new technology. Sort of things where you want to have them a bit off to the side, just in case something goes wrong. You don't want it to be in your big metropolis, of which there are a number of larger cities, which are not inside of domes. And each of the cities is sort of interconnected, but they're all also self-sufficient. They have one centralized governing body, but each has kind of a, I guess I'd say kind of a city council / city government that also rule over these self-sufficient cities. That's a bit about the world. Now onto the tech. So this planet is in a retrofuturistic world. So as I mentioned before, because of the atmosphere, they can't really broadcast signals like we can. And pretty much the immediate side effect of that is that they do not have wireless technology. As I said, wireless in their world means radio. So everything, by pure necessity, is wired in. There are cables everywhere, there are wires, there are knobs and dials and switches and flashing lights. And everything's kind of not quite boxy, but definitely not sleek lines. Another thing is they developed in a completely opposite direction from touchscreen technology. So everything is very tangible. If something has a lot of computing power, it's going to look like it can house a lot of data. For instance, the more powerful supercomputers will literally take up entire rooms of government facilities. It's just by sheer necessity of having that much power and memory and energy requirements, they are these massive machines. So anyway, to go back to the complete opposite of touchscreen, I don't just mean that things are, like flat and you're not constantly smudging your hands over stuff. I also mean that instead of touching the screen, you make what is on the screen come out of it so you can handle it. They're on all models of computers, from the high-end, top-of-the-line, just built government supercomputers to the hand-me-down computers of your grandparents. All computers have a switch and a dial that allows you to touch what is on the screen. What happens is the computer will actually project a 3D model of the object you were looking at. And because it is essentially constrained by electrical impulses, you can't touch it with your bare hands. It goes straight through it. You have instead special gloves that allow the movement of your hands to be translated into electrical impulses, which then allow you to manipulate the object. So, for instance, say you're looking at a... well, hey, I'll give you an example. Say you're working in a program such as ZBrush, and you are designing a joint for a ball-jointed doll. Instead of having to use your mouse to manipulate the size and dimensions, and having to use the computer program to rotate the object to make sure that everything is still in the correct specifications, instead you'd flip the switch, which immediately boots up the image, and then you turn the dial to whatever kind of more physical sense that you want it to be. You can do it so it's kind of more nebulous, or so it's very much something that is almost concrete in your hands. You put on your gloves, and like I said, instead of having to use a mouse and to rotate it, you rotate it with your hands. You shape it with your own hands, and then once you're done, whatever modification you want to do, you simply push it back into the computer where the image comes out. You flip another switch, the image disappears, you flip off the switch that makes the image appear, and you now have the modified item that is inside the computer because it is registered the changes you made to the electrical impulses that represented that object. Kind of hand-wavy science, I know, but it's probably one of the most futuristic aspects of their technology that I can give you an example of. Because most of the rest of it seems quite dated, which goes back to the retro-futuristic. It isn't supposed to be, like, faster than light travel and, I don't know, and like touch screens and everything like that. It is supposed to be more what in the mid-60s, people thought the 21st or 22nd century was going to look like. Minus the flying cars, because that would just end horribly for everyone, let's be honest. I mean, could you imagine car accidents? Not only on the X and Y axis, but also on the Z axis? Yeah, that would just not turn out well for anyone. The field of robotics and genetics is also quite advanced. And in the field of robotics, one of the things that is quite commonplace is to replace damaged parts with cybernetic parts. Now, some people do this for aesthetic reasons or for other personal reasons, and some people do it just out of sheer necessity. It's kind of like a ghost in the shell sort of thing, which Gothic Shadow was actually the one to come up with explaining it like that. It's really up to individual people how much they integrate technology into themselves, into their being. So you'll find some people who are completely organic, all the way to people who have that have maybe only one part of them that is still what they were born with. And either end of the spectrum is seen as quite natural and quite mainstream. It's all up to individual tastes. Now, one of the things is, except for in cases where someone is whose body is completely damaged and has to be put into a purely robotic body. Other than that, humanoid robots are banned. And actually, in the cases of doing a full body transplant, you essentially have to petition the government to receive permission to do that. It gets very complicated. There's a lot of bureaucracy, and the main reason for that is once you start making robots very humanoid, and making them so humanoid in some cases that you would not be able to distinguish them from flesh and blood people, then you start running into a lot of ethical dilemmas. Basically you run into a lot of ethical dilemmas and a lot of philosophical questions like, what does it mean to be alive? What does it mean to be fully sentient? At what point does a robot stop being a robot with programming and start having free will, etc., etc., etc. So to bypass that whole issue is expressly forbidden to create, to attempt to create humanoid robots with the sentience of humans, or whatever Cassie's people are. Just because something is illegal does not mean that it doesn't still happen. However, the government is very good at finding these illegal humanoid robots. Now, I'm saying humanoid robots for a reason rather than androids, and that's because androids, grammatically speaking, actually refers only to male humanoid robots. Gynoids would be the equivalent for female. So I'm just sticking with humanoid robots because that actually covers the full spectrum. Much better than just saying androids. As cool as that word is. So this is actually one of the humanoid robots in Cassie's story. This is Vala. Let's see if we can get her a bit closer. Boop. This is Vala, and she is one of 4 humanoid robots that live in Cassie's home. Now, the reason Cassie's family actually has permission to have them is due to her father. Cassie's father works for the government in the field of robotics. He's quite a brilliant scientist. His name is Dr. Hoffwinkle, but I've nicknamed him Dr. Pa, or Dr. Papa, just because he's Cassie's Papa. Anyway, and one thing is, since he works for the government, he is often part of the committee that has to decide how sentient the robots are, if they have a humanoid appearance. How sentient they are, and whether, if they're in a gray area or if they are completely legal. And there were 4 little robots, they're quite tiny, that were declared illegal. They were actually confiscated, and they were going to be incinerated. But Dr. Hoffwinkle looked at their tiny wee little faces and said, their programming is so simple that although they have extremely humanoid features, their programming does not, their artificial intelligence, doesn't broach the problem of being human-like. So, the government actually allowed him to take them home with him, provided they stay inside his residence only and never leave it. Even in the event of his death, they are not allowed to leave the residence. And I'm not joking about how simple-minded they are. They are extremely simple-minded. They're adorable, and they try really hard to be good little housekeepers, but they kind of fail. in adorably cute ways because, as you can see, they're little chibis. As a group, they're actually referred to as the Chibots because they're chibis. They're so cute. Anyway, that actually brings me to a good spot. I'm going to talk about Cassie's life. And then the third video is actually going to be the beginning of her story. So, see you all soon. Bye.